Welcome to the Lift Your Story podcast with guest Brad Gage.
Hi, everyone. I'm LaurieAnn. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas, and we would like to welcome you to our Lift Your Story podcast.
So in this episode, we're pleased to have Brad Gage, and he's a writer, host, and actor, and he's also the host and producer of Real Feels Project. Try and say that really quickly. Thank you so much, Brad, for being here. We're going to learn more about that.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
We're glad to have you. So tell us about your project.
The Real Feels Project is a combination of video essays, podcasts, and kind of, I'm starting to formulate a toolkit that is aiming at reframing masculinity for the modern age. I think there's the situation we kind of find ourselves in now, where our media and television, movies, social media, what the traditions that have been passed down by our parents, they've all been kind of happening to us without us being as conscious of its effect. And so I am aiming to kind of shift perspectives, educate people, and get a more equitable future for men and women, which basically means men having more empathy for women and respecting them more.
Nice. Do you have a specific, there's so many different generations and such, but are you specifically targeting a typical generation, or is it all the generations you're?
I can mostly speak to mine and younger because I know it. I understand my father's and grandfather's generations, and do my best to educate as it pertains to them. But I use a lot of pop culture in my essays, and a lot of those are references that I know and that maybe some younger people might know. Basically, my audience is right now aimed a little younger, because especially teen boys are the ones who are having their reality kind of formulated for them. They're making decisions. They're really soaking everything in. Their brain is still developing until they're in their mid-20s. So that's when major changes can be made. And once we're in our late 20s and 30s, a lot of our thoughts, our beliefs, our traditions are kind of ingrained. And unless we approach them with an open mind, which a lot of people do, you're not able to change those things. So it is really about getting in there early, educating boys about consent, about empathy, about the female experience and how we're different, respecting that, and having kind of some reverence for our differences, so that we're not kind of just letting culture teach us good and bad behaviors when it comes to relationships.
Which generation are you in?
I'm a millennial. I was born in 1987. So yeah, I don't know how long that lasts, but I'm a millennial. I think it's millennial and then Gen Z, and then I don't think we have a younger one yet. I think Gen Z is the youngest right now.
Incredible. It's funny, the millennials were a little bit different. You had the Gen X, you had the Gen Y, then you had the millennial, and then you got the Gen Z. It's like, and all this happened so quickly though, from boomers. Like, sorry, Roy, just quickly, I just wanted to say, like, the generational shift from traditional to modernization has just taken such a quick shift. Like, the mothers staying home and all that, and then all of a sudden, that's different. Then all of a sudden you're looking at the men are helping to take care of the babies, which was not the traditional role, and the women are working, and that just in the last few decades. It's not been a long time since that's come about. So this is very interesting. Sorry, that's why I was bringing that up. I think it's necessary almost to, yeah.
Well, I think since I'm a boomer, and I think a lot of our perspective on millennials, right or wrong, they're lazy. They feel entitled. They just want everything given to them. They don't want to work for it. you know. Now, that's a big generalization, okay?
Yes.
So now, not every millennial is that, whatever, but that's kind of like the big 40,000 foot view of from a boomer to a millennial. Now, tell me from a millennial to a boomer what it is.
Well, it's interesting. I think what's funny about the generational arguments is as it kind of goes, boomers, the greatest generation probably thought a lot of those things about boomers, especially in the 1960s. And so it is this kind of, it's the same, but it's different situation. It's also a little bit of chicken and the egg, because millennials are coming from the generation of boomers. We are learning from them. We're raised by them. And so are we like this because inherently that's what young people are like? Are we like this because we were taught to be like this? Or is that just a perspective that older people will always have because they cling so tightly to their view of the way that things were in their life as being the right way? So it is kind of, I believe all of it's true, and it's just kind of, you have to be open to each person's perspective being different and addressing those individually.
I love it.
Yeah, I think that's a great perception. It really is. That's very astute, I think.
Thank you, because I think we're always going to go. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Roy. Yes, I know. There's always that asterisk at the end of anything I say, but it is no, and I think you have to respect that. You have to respect those opinions and not negate them right away. But also, it's like there's been some handicapping happening with millennials because of student loan debt, because wages haven't gone up, because this and that. And so you look at, there, in some ways you could say that millennials are working even harder because they don't have one job to survive. I have been out of college for over 10 years, and I have only for maybe 3 of those 10 years had one job. I've otherwise had multiple in order to survive. And I still have student loan debt and still have a lot of debt outside of that. So, and it's not because I don't work, it's because it's just a completely different system. And so there's nothing wrong or right with it. It would be good if people were not having to work multiple jobs, but at the same time, it is how it is. And all we can do is try to look at how to make it better and make it more equitable. And I think that's a big word that has been thrown around a lot lately, but I love that word because it's not equality, it's equity, which is respecting each individual's journey and not blanketing an idea for everybody.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, when we grew up, a lot of people went to work for X company. They worked there 30 years, retired or whatever. Not everybody, but that was kind of the way it was. Now for you guys, like you say, with the technology changing so fast, you start out at this company and all of a sudden technologies change and their model is no longer valid. So then you're going over here trying to find a job, trying to catch up on the new technology to be able to be employable somewhere else. You got the COVID in the mix. So, I mean, you guys are really, y'all are really in a hard situation.
Never mind the rising prices of real estate. I keep looking. My son is not too much, I guess he's a couple of years younger than you. He was an 89 baby. And I look at my poor kids. I've got 3 of them. And I'm going, how are you ever going to afford a house? Like they're a little shack here that used to be, is a house ever affordable? No, it's always a tough thing that you have to get into. But the prices are ridiculous for the amount of money we're still making. I don't think that the salaries have, even when I look at what I was making 30 years ago, there's not a huge difference of what they're paying today for, your entry levels. And yet everything else has skyrocketed. So, I know we're going off topic here because we're talking about, equity, but this is
really
something that it worries me. And I know that Millennials are a lot more concerned about the environment. They're a lot more concerned. And I do have to say that, yes, there is that view of, I would say entitlement, you're right. And I think that it's us, the way we brought up our kids, that gave them that feeling of entitlement. But as far as laziness goes, I know my 3 kids work hard, but they're quite often there's discouragement there too, though. Like you always feel as if, like, oh my goodness, when am I going to get over that hurdle? You guys had an easier time. And I will say that we did. We still struggled. We still had to find those jobs. I was a little bit of I'm the borderline genexer. So a lot of the boomers had my jobs when I came out. So you got to work a little harder. But again, as far as economically, I really feel for you guys. I mean, you almost have to live in the boonies to afford a house.
And that's where I moved. I live in the boonies of New York right now, but it is.
Well, when one of my sons is an electrical engineer, when he graduated from college around 2000, I think, and they would have people from industry come and talk to him, about the workforce and all this. And this one guy told him, he said, due to technology, the way it's changing, in your 40-year work career, you're going to probably have to retrain 10 to 15 times just to keep up.
Mm-hmm. But that, and that's such a good job still. Engineers. I mean, my parents are an engineer and a nurse, and I know back in the 70s, that was like standard. Like, these are good jobs, they're never going away. And of course, you make plans, and God laughs because everything has changed since then for both of them. And it's one of those things where you mentioned engineering, and it reminds me of my father's story because he went to a technical high school, and I think. Mm-hmm. These types of high school programs have definitely gone by the wayside, where you can train in a profession that is directly, you're making money out of high school as you're studying engineering, you're studying pipe fitting, you're studying, working in the shop, different types of things that are they're not as lofty and creative as I think. At least for me and my generation, it was a lot of like, you can do whatever you want. But then I almost wonder sometimes about how helpful it would be. And I think it's happening now more and more where kids are not going to college, they're going to trade schools. And maybe those types of programs would be great if they were offered in high schools, while high schools are already at capacity just trying to teach the children. But giving more of those types of options so that people can at least have a training and a way to make money. I don't know if those programs are as popular as they were in the 70s. Maybe they are back again now, but I've recently learned about this going away over the past 20 years, and I wonder if that would be helpful.
Well, I can speak because from experience, I didn't go to college. I went into an apprenticeship program, 4-year apprenticeship program. I started in 1971. So I started out making $2.07.5 an hour. Now the half. I was in the union, but anyway. I spent 4 years. Okay, I went to school 2 nights a week for 2.5 hours a night. I worked, every day for 4 years learning, and my total cost for that 4-year program, tuition and books, was under $500. I got my journeyman's license, and I made, and I was able to make 6 figures in my career as an electrician.
I'm sure. And you had no debt from school, and you were able to grow, build, have the American dream that has now completely shifted. I recently, to quote a meme here, I saw a very funny meme, which was, 1920s, and it was this person who says, oh my God, the stock market crashed and I lost my house and my job and my land and all this stuff. And then 2020, COVID hits, and the person from 2020 goes, I've never had any of those things. And it is just funny. It's like, we don't even have stuff to lose. And this is not a woe is me, because it is how it is, and you can't really compare the dynamics, the circumstances are completely different. For me, it's about, okay, what can be done so that people can live in more peace where there is not constant economic anxiety. And that's a territory that I don't know much about. I know about psychology, comedy, masculinity, but not so much about finance and economics.
So,
So, go ahead. Go ahead, Laurie.
I was just going to say, going back to that project, I'm curious. So you're talking about teaching. What made you decide to work with this particular project?
I have been an actor and a host in Los Angeles for about 10, 11 years. And through that process, it's always about finding your niche. And you're like, okay, I'm going to be this type of actor and this. And I've tried a lot of different things and really had a great time doing it. But about 2 years ago, I was kind of having this dark night of the soul where I was like, okay, I'm not getting empowered by any of this work. I don't feel like I'm growing. I don't feel like I'm reaching anybody. And I kind of had this, light bulb go off. You read enough self-help books, you read enough and talk to enough people, you slowly realize that at the most unending, infinite, constantly replenishing source of empowerment is actually service. Serving other people. You can do that anytime and it feels good and it feels empowering. And so if I could figure out a way to get paid to be of service using the gifts that I've already sharpened, the tools that I've already sharpened as a host and a writer and a performer, that would be great. And so I kind of tried a few things out and I realized that my experience as a cis, straight, white man from the Midwest who was in a fraternity and has kind of lived this conditioned toxic masculinity for a long time, and now have had a lot of female role models, I can use the information from the women in my life, very much, namely my girlfriend Allison, who has been a huge kind of usher into this. Listening to them, reading books, reading a lot of these books I have right here, especially this one right here, which has been kind of the basis of my work. It's called Boys and Sex by Peggy Orenstein. And her thing is all about education for young boys. And so I just kind of started trying things out and then realized that, John Oliver does this great show about news. And he doesn't talk about topics of masculinity, sexuality, gender relations. What if I did that? And so that's kind of where I've landed with it. And I get to make jokes and I get to make references and I get to write these essays. And it really gets me going, gets me very excited to talk about these topics. And so that's where kind of what led me to now.
That's fantastic.
So, okay, when I grew up, I mean, you were talking about masculinity, the guy was a worker, the guy this, the guy that. And of course, I was always taught to respect women, because my mother, my wife, I do. Are you seeing in your generation, how has that changed?
I think the definition of respect has changed a little bit, and it's changed through more information, through more empathy, and a little bit of tough love from social media. The Me Too movement was a big surprise to a lot of men, and not at all a surprise to any women. And that to me shows this kind of dissonance between the information that is coming to each gender or that's being absorbed. And so respect for a woman, I think in previous generations was being courteous, being chivalrous, holding doors, but not only that, like listening, like I would say baby boomers, it was women's liberation. Like this was, women were finding empowerment in themselves. They were not only homemakers, and that's a really cool thing. And supporting that was a big part of, I think, the boomers generation, is supporting women in the workforce. We got 9 to 5, great example, Working Girl. Like these movies are showing this and showing that, oh, this is a good thing and I should support this. So now it's shifted, that women have found more of a place in the workforce. Now it's about finding their place in relationships where understanding the dynamics of abuse, understanding the dynamics of consent. And so that women can not only have a job, but now they do not have to be as much in fear of the men around them. And it's just one of those things that I say, I love, like, I think most men respect women. I think most men are open and thoughtful and loving, but they just don't always know how to interact because they haven't spoken to enough women who are honest with them for various reasons. And so I just think that's the difference is understanding what respect means and also acknowledging that it's okay that respect meant something different. People say now it's like, oh, well, you used to be able to do that. And it's like, technically you used to be able to. It wasn't good before, but people did allow it. And now the point of our evolution, our kind of progress is to understand that those things aren't okay anymore, and that we can figure out better ways to stop some of these negative abusive behaviors from happening.
Lovely.
Yeah.
By the way, I just have to quickly say, I was sort of chuckling earlier because Roy said when I grew up. Roy still hasn't grown up, but anyway, while he was trying to grow up, but he hasn't gotten there yet. Very interesting fact too, and I do understand that, you know, the men have to understand it, but there's also some women, you know, now if you go out, they want, you know, let's say it's a first date or you're, you know, working on a relationship, they'll look at the guy and there's a sort of shift that I want to go Dutch because I don't want to owe you anything. Like if the guy pays for it, you think that you're going to end up having to recompense it in some way. So you'd rather to, I guess, protect yourself. I'm paying my part. So I don't owe you anything. So I would imagine those are the type of things that you are going to be trying to educate these, you know, the younger men that, you know, it's not offensive that we're saying that we want to go Dutch, which is of course good for you too, because you don't have to put extra money out. But but there is a significance to going Dutch, and it's not just saying, oh well, I don't want you to pay because, you know, I don't want to overstep my boundaries, but it goes even beyond that. I don't want to owe you anything. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, there has been this idea that there is kind of a currency that men are owed something if they're nice, if they do a romantic gesture, if they buy something, they are owed a woman's body, and that's entitlement, and that's objectification, and so that's kind of the root of what I'm trying to talk about and teach to young men, is that women are just like you are not just your body, you are not just how you look, you are not just your hair. You are something special beyond that, deeper inside. That's your specialness, your soul. A woman has that, and if you respect that as much as you respect your own, you will slowly understand that objectifying them is bad. Objectifying them is actually an affront on your own soul, on your own self, because you're not showing them respect that you would show to yourself. So yeah, I mean, social currency, relationship, and sexual currency, those ideas are rampant, and I think men are slowly learning this thing about consent, where even if it gets to the point where she is come back to your place and you're both naked and you've been making out and all this stuff, and even at that point, right before you have sex, if the woman says that they don't want to do it, that has to be respected. And that can happen for multiple reasons that you don't even know what's going on inside their head. There might be sexual trauma. There might be something else going on. They might just be going along with it and feel uncomfortable and then say no. And those types of things, and it has to be okay, and it has to not be a blow on your male ego. You have to say, you know what, cool, and give space for respect. And the more space for respect you give, actually, the more safe it feels, and then many times the more sex you have because everyone feels safe and heard and consensual.
So are girls in your generation, are they more apt to come up to you if they say, hey, let's go out? You know, like back when in my day, you know, the guy had to ask the girl. The girls never. Now they may tell their friend to tell your friend that you, but they will never come to you and say, "How come you don't ask me out?" You know. But I think that's changed in your generation.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a part of women's empowerment. Yeah, I mean, I think have I been asked out a lot more than probably an older generation? Yes, like women are a lot of times are like, I'm just gonna go after what I want too, and that works out best for everybody. And I think a lot of guys actually love that. That's why something like Bumble really works, the Bumble dating app, because that only allows women to send a message first. Men cannot send messages to women, and some people prefer that. There's all types of preferences, but what you're talking about is that it's a traditional gender role. It's the reason why there were Sadie Hawkins dances. It's like, why does it?
Yeah.
You have to have a special dance where women can ask men to the dance. It's like, no, like everyone is equal. Everyone gets to have that free will and that power to kind of go after what they want. And so, yeah. But here's the thing: my generation is not devoid of traditional gender roles, and a lot of there's actually been research done in this great book. I'm just plugging all the books that I love. This book called For the Love of Men by Liz Plank. She talks about research where our generation is more against women in the workforce than Generation X.
Really?
Our generation's men are more against being the stay-at-home dad than Generation X. And part of that is because women in the workforce, everyone supports it. Everyone knows what that looks like. There's movies about it. There's all this stuff. There has been so little information, education, social media, regular media, movies, TV, that has supported and depicted stay-at-home dads.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is still a very emasculating thing, and it's seen as a negative thing still. And so our generation is slowly creeping up on that idea that, like, actually we don't like this because we don't know what it is, and we don't know what our place is. So we're actually kind of against it. And I think it's a very surprising fact, and shows kind of a window for people to speak to and create a place for men to feel empowered as homemakers.
Yeah.
And it feels weird to even say that, because part of my reptilian masculine brain is like, that's not okay. That's not manly. That's what kind of guy are you who's talking like this? And it's about working against those instincts, because it is just as okay as being the breadwinner.
I love, there was one, I'm going back here, but Friends. I love Friends. I think I've watched it like 7 times. But there was one where they were looking for a nanny, and they ended up picking the guy, and the guy is wonderful. I love the way that they portrayed him, because he said, hey, I love doing this. This is what I do. And I think that that's the thing, is that you're right. Hollywood is not, they're making it out to be, if you're a stay-at-home dad, you're lazy, you really didn't want to go out to work when you could have gone out to work and all of that. Yet they don't do that to mothers who stay home for the whole time looking for jobs, once the kids are at school. So there does have to be a shift in that, because it's just as important role if a dad stays home as if a mother stayed home. I'm sorry. And they do say that it's a lot of work. It is. My mother stayed home. I didn't. But that's the whole shift of roles does have to happen. I find it fascinating about being against those roles, but I can see where that is. It's just how it's being portrayed. And Hollywood has got so much influence. Unfortunately, it still does. So does social media and Hollywood. And yeah.
I can remember probably more in the later 50s and early 60s when women started going to work, particularly in the 50s. If a woman went to work, the guy was looked down on because he couldn't provide for his family.
Too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that I can, as a little kid, I can still remember people, she has, that's not, he can't afford it. And it was very negative back then.
And it could have just been that the woman's like, I love working. I mean, like, we all find our purpose in our work.
Yeah.
And every woman's purpose is not always to be a mom. So it's I mean, it's always interesting how much of a breadth of experience we get to see in our lives. The changes that you have each seen and that I have seen, and pre-computers, and now Gen Z is living only in computers. And it's I love looking at all of that and giving the perspective and the reverence for each of those moments, and but making sure we're learning from it, changing and evolving, instead of sticking to, it used to be like this, I liked it better then, let's take it back to how it was, because that's not helpful.
No, you can't. I mean, you can't. It's moving forward. It's like they say, that's in the presence, but it's coming. What's there, we can't go get it yet, but changes is, you have to go with it. Yeah. And if you look at through the generations, I mean, I looked back and I studied, Marilyn French. There we go. I'm going to throw up my name. And she did the study of women, and there were tribes where the women were the ones that took care of everything. The guys did nothing. They worked, they cooked, they took care of the kids, and the guys did nothing. They had the only thing they did was go out and get the meat. And the females were at the forefront of, they were the matriarchs and everything. It changes, and then it became the men were the patriarchs, and then like their roles are constantly evolving in different patterns, different ways. It's the way it is.
Who is that again? I'm going to take a little.
Marilyn French.
Marilyn French.
She's quite good. She wrote a couple of really good books too. One of them was when she had boys and she didn't know what it was like, and all the messes that they make, and cleaning the bathroom. She didn't realize that was going to be something that was, and it was, thank goodness I read it, because I ended up with 2 boys. I wouldn't have known what it would be like. I had only sisters, and dad kind of hid away. So yeah.
I love
really
that.
Good. She does a lot of history work on that. So
gonna check her out. That sounds like important research.
Yeah.
So Brad, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Well, they can reach out to me through my website, realfeels.com, REALFEELS.com, or through a DM on Instagram or Twitter. Just look for Brad Gage and or on YouTube. So I'm on all these things, and I do love engaging in conversations about it, because that's the point. Yes, I welcome any and all, and opposing opinions. I don't want to get into debates necessarily, but I do love having conversations about things that people are passionate about, no matter if I totally agree with them or not.
So you don't mind conflict. Like some people will get onto social media and they have one bad thing written and they get all upset. But I mean, that's the whole point, right? You need all kinds of opinions.
As long as people aren't mean, as long as people aren't cruel about it,
exactly.
or personal digs or something, but having a philosophical discussion is fantastic. I love it.
There's a saying, it's okay to disagree, just don't be disagreeable.
There you go.
I love that. I love that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Brad. We really appreciate this. I love this subject. I think it's great.
Yes.
And I really appreciate all that. We'll have to keep an eye on that YouTube for sure.
Well, thank you, LaurieAnn.
We'll have to have you come back on another time.
Sure. Roy, I would love to. This is such a great show. You guys do such great work, and I'm just so happy to meet you. This is lovely. Wonderful people.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.
Okay. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.